Masks. When you look the word mask up in the dictionary, it states that a mask is to conceal something from view. Now, it's fairly easy to follow others and to hide behind a mask, but it's important to stay true to yourself despite all of this. And I learned this lesson while at my church last summer. I was there because I was attending my grandpa's funeral. There had been a recent event, and it made it so that I no longer lived with my dad. And it made the funeral kind of uncomfortable, considering that it was filled with people who were all from his side of the family. Now, although this experience was pretty painful and uncomfortable, I don't regret it because I know I learned a valuable lesson. I learned that staying true to myself and not hiding behind false identities is something that's incredibly important. Eventually, the time came at the funeral where we had to walk into the whole service as a family. Instead of the hushed voices and rustling of papers soothing me like it used to, it didn't anymore. For good reason, considering it was my grandpa's funeral. As I looked up at my grandpa's casket, I felt the familiar heat in my face, which is how I always feel when I'm about to cry. I thought back through all of the memories that I have with my grandpa. How he'd call me Shay Shay, never Shayla. He'd drive to my home softball games when I was younger and sit in his truck, even though they'd go way past 9, and his idea of a bedtime was 6 p.m. I learned so many important lessons from my grandpa, and one of them was to never be fake to family, to never put on a fake mask. Halfway through the service, I turned around and looked at my family behind me and the rest of the people that were attending the service, and I felt so angry because I realized that the only 2 people crying, other than me, were 2 of my cousins. I scanned through all of my family members through the tears in my eyes, and I saw that even my grandpa's own children weren't crying. They remained stone-faced. That just angered me so much because while some people don't show their emotions and cry necessarily when they're sad, I just feel like crying is a part of funerals that you start to accept. It's just normal. It made me angry that there wasn't any crying. Now, after the funeral, I walked into the room where the rest of my relatives were, and I saw one of my aunts ahead of us in the church. When I smiled at her, I received a cold and empty glare back, as if I wasn't even there. So I separated from my mom and I zigzagged through my relatives and I rushed to find my grandma, who I love, and she's my favorite person in the world because I knew that my grandma would make me feel better. So I sat next to my grandma for the rest of the day, and between each person that visited with her, she stopped to talk to me until the next person would not so politely tear her away for a handshake and some condolences. And as the day passed, I was blanketed by my grandma's warmth. Even under the sad circumstances, I couldn't help but to notice the contrast between her and my relatives' actions and how artificial they seemed to act compared to how true and loving she acted towards me. And it led me to question if there was really even under anything at all under those masks they put on. They shake visitors' hands with plain smiles, as if my grandpa's death had no effect on them, briefly returning to their motionless faces only when they take breaks from talking. And immediately, it made me so angry. And I began to realize some things then because of that. I realized that nearly everyone at this funeral put on a facade for the people that were there, never letting any traces of emotion seep through their skin. How the moment they're out of sight from any form of public eye, the emotions that they do let out are cruel, like the way my aunt glared at me. The second thing that I realized that day was that these people who watched me grow up, they really couldn't have ever loved me at all. Because how can you be so cold to someone who you once claimed you loved? It was all another act. They didn't love me like my grandpa did. The last thing I realized was that I really don't want anything to do with them at all. If they can make me an outcast and hate me so easily, as well as being too fake to show emotion at their own father's funeral, I don't want to be a part of that. And on that day, those family members that I once looked up to, they became no longer role models, but reminders of who I could have become. And I refuse to do that. I will not become someone who fears emotion. I refuse to wear a mask.